Well, hello, and welcome to Therapist Casebook. This is Dr. Mark Waller, and I'm headed into town. Pick up my mail, and it's a beautiful winter day. The sun is out, looks gorgeous, and I've just spent the morning working on the next video for the YouTube channel. So it's quite a challenge, and I debated back and forth whether or not I should actually do this episode because it gets a little deep, but I'm going to do it anyway, and we'll see how it turns out. Hopefully Christina will be able to follow along. I'm not sure she's ready to dive off the deep end with me, but we'll see. So what we're going to talk about is kind of an amalgamation of what I have come up with in terms of how we create our reality. And it's kind of good news and bad news. The good news is that we can create it. We're doing it almost on a sub-millisecond basis. And the bad news is, as long as we allow our false self be the major emotional, psychological force in our lives, then the false self is what is creating our reality. And so what this episode is going to be about, it's going to be about, how that reality gets created, and it ties awareness in with quantum physics in a way that's probably going to get me beat up pretty bad by some physicists and neuroscientists, but I've got my own little theory here I'm going to put forward, and we'll see if it makes sense to you. Basically, if you study the dual slit experiment, and the dual slit experiment was an experiment they did a number of years ago where they fired atomic or subatomic particles through a target with two slits. And what would appear, if they put a photographic plate or a sensor on the back of the two slits, it would appear to be an interference pattern similar to what you would find if, let's say, you threw two rocks in a pool. So there would be the expanding waves, and eventually the two waves would interfere with one another. And so what would happen is when two peaks crashed into one another, they would add and make a bigger ripple. If a peak and a trough ran into one another, they would cancel. And so what you get is this interference pattern, like two waves squeezing through the slits in the dual slit experiment. However, as soon as you measure what's going through one of the other slits, the activity of measuring what's going through the slits actually converts the wave function. They call it collapsing the wave. And that collapsing of the wave function produces particles. So now, if you look at a photographic plate or a target behind the two slits, instead of seeing a wave interference pattern, you see two places where defined particles have hit, and so you get like two little bumps or two little areas of concentration where the particles have gone through the slits and hit the target. Well, this gets to the central mystery of quantum mechanics. And the thing about this is that, goodness sakes, the thing about this is that what their speculation is that the particles exist in a superposition. Well, what does that mean? It means that, according to quantum theory, the particles exist in all positions at the same time and produce this wave function. And so when the measurement is taken, that superposition is collapsed and a distinct particle emerges from that measurement. Okay, well, this all got me thinking. So if that's true, then the way we experience reality might very well be related to the dual slit type of experience. In other words, what if our awareness is the function that actually collapses the wave and turns it into particles? What that would mean is that we are literally changing this function that has all possibilities at once into a discrete experience simply by becoming aware of it. And that set me off on all kinds of different directions. One of which is years ago I read something very interesting, and what it said was our awareness of experience is the experience we are aware of. In other words, our experience is made of the substance of our awareness of it. So awareness and experience are inseparable. And so just as in the dual slit experience, where the measurement converts the wave into a particle, in my theory, the way I'm interpreting this is our awareness of experience converts this, superposition of infinite possibilities into an experience that we're able to perceive. Anyway, talking through this with you helps a little bit because I need to clarify this before we record on Friday, and you can probably tell I'm grappling with this a little bit. So anyway, it's quite a struggle. Now, interestingly enough, I've been using Grok AI, which is part of X, to dialogue this through and come up with some very interesting things. The biggest challenge behind this is not necessarily understanding this little theory of mine, but actually putting it together in some kind of a coherent presentation. Now, here's the other thing that I discovered doing this. In order for this experience of reality to really be as fulfilling as it might be, just a second, I'm going to talk to my car. Turn off the steering wheel heater. Okay, my hands were getting warm there. So, many of you have been on the channel, you've heard us talk about the default mode network. Well, the default mode network in the brain is a network spread across the brain that gives us our sense of self and also creates the narrative or the drama, which is maybe a better way of putting it, that we experience in our lives. And that narrative, in my theory here, that narrative, the emotions, the perceptions, and the behaviors, and the sense of self that go with it, all created by the default mode network, is the false self. And as long as we believe in that false self is what's creating our reality. And I believe this is what's overlooked by so many people who are talking about creating your own reality, manifesting, whatever it is you want to manifest. So here's where it gets tricky. So the only way to get to the real purity of the flow of life is to disidentify with that false self. And once that's out of the way, we're able to experience, for lack of a better term, a state of flow. And many of you have probably heard of the flow state. And it's just the state where living becomes effortless. There's no sensation of a me that's in the way of it. You're just living life without any self-referencing. It's just, you're completely involved in the present moment. And of course, that's where we want to go. And so the problem then is, if we try to manifest things in our lives from the false self, there's this element of self-promotion or getting what we want involved in that manifestation. And as long as that's taking place, we're not really getting the purity of the present moment. We're getting this egocentric agenda, and I don't believe it creates a true experience. I think it creates a lot of noise. And interference. So part of the idea in this presentation I'm putting together is there's this paradox in manifestation, because if we manifest from the false self, we just get more misery and drama and suffering, even though we might be focused on getting $1 million. All the hidden agendas that we're not aware of that are being spawned by our emotional reactivity and our childhood psychological programming, they're all in the way and causing problems that we really don't want to experience. And so in order to fully manifest what we want in our lives, we have to disidentify from this false self. And then when we want to go into that mindful or meditative state to try to manifest something in our lives, this agenda of self has to be completely set aside, which is really a paradox. It makes for a very weird experience. So we can't actually ask for what we want in the way we would traditionally think about it, because the very essence of asking for what we want activates the false self and its hidden emotional agendas, and that's not good. That's not going to manifest what we want. And so part of what my dilemma is in doing this video is I've somehow got to figure out how to communicate this to people where they can create their own reality, but the grasping and the wanting and the attachment to a certain outcome is the thing that will defeat the manifestation. So that puts us in a kind of an unusual situation, but we can't get into the purity of the flow of the present moment as long as the ego self has its own agenda. And so that's what I'm struggling with. And hopefully I got a couple days to kind of sort this out in a coherent manner. And of course, I don't want to offend people who really take this manifesting seriously. But I think it's maybe just a bit of a deeper problem than we've thought of in the past. Anyway, those are my thoughts on what we're going to record on Friday. This is Therapist Casebook, and for now, it's closed.